And I got up to the immigration officer, right? And the guy was like, hey, what brings you to Canada? And I just said, I'm a stand-up comedian. And he just looked at me and he went, do you need a permit for that? And he just let me in. You know, that's a security problem. That is an issue. Do you know what I mean? Do you know what this means? This means if ISIS wanted to sneak into Canada, all they would have to do is go up to the border and hand the officer a poster for a show and be like, it's a show called Jokes That Don't Bomb. Huh? You know, like... I've loved moving here. I think the immigrants in the room can relate to this. It's weird when you move somewhere. I feel like a lot of weird things happen to you all the time. You know, like recently I got back from doing some stand-up overseas and I landed at Toronto airport at Pearson. And I got up to the immigration officer, right? And the guy was like, hey, what brings you to Canada? And I was like, oh, I'm here to work. I've got a work permit. And he's like, oh, what do you do for a living? And I just said, I'm a stand-up comedian. And he just looked at me and he went, do you need a permit for that? And he just let me in. Bro, do you know how it feels to have a job so not taken seriously by anyone that you're a zero threat to national security? Not good. Dude, I was so happy I wasn't going through immigration like with my parents, my Filipino parents, because the last thing I need is for them to hear someone say that and be like, see, I told you, you know. You should listen to him, he's wearing a tie, you know. Bro, he didn't even look at my papers. He literally laughed in my face and just went, come on through. You know, that's a security problem. That is an issue. Do you know what I mean? Do you know what this means? This means if ISIS wanted to sneak into Canada, all they would have to do is go up to the border and hand the officer a poster for a show and be like, it's a show called Jokes That Don't Bomb. Huh? You know, like an explosive hour of comedy, you know? Like, because I've been thinking a lot about moving here versus moving from the Philippines to New Zealand when I was a little kid, when I was 8 years old. Because I got to say, those two experiences, super different, you know? And I think how different they are is depending on what country you've just come from, and when people find out that information, how they react to that, you know? Like, because when people find out you're from New Zealand, they're like, what are you doing here, you know? But when people find out you're from the Philippines, they're like, what are you doing here? You know, like, it's like a little more subtle, but it's different, you know? It also depends on where you come from, what reactions you get, and what labels you get too. You know, you'll get a different label. Like when people find out you're from the Philippines, what do they call you? Immigrant, right? The classic, right? The default, immigrant. But when people find out you've moved from a Western country to a country like Canada, what do they call you? Expat, exactly. Does everyone here know what expat is? You guys know? All right, for those of you who don't know, expat is a word that comes from the Latin phrase expatria, which means immigrant, but white. I'm joking. I'm joking. Obviously, it doesn't mean that, right? It actually means someone who lives far away from their native country, but they may or may not stay. They may go back, they may stay, right? And but most of the time, 99% of the time, the people who identify as expats are white, right? And I've always wondered why that is. Why is that? And I think I've realized that maybe it's like white people's way of telling us like they have options, you know, like that. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like you guys telling us, me like, you know, I don't have to be here, like that, you know? Like, have you ever tried telling an expat to go back to where he came from? They're just like, I'm trying, I'm just waiting for cheap flights. You know, like it's... But this is an expat now, right? And that's so confusing for a lot of people. Their brains fucking melt when I tell them that, you know? Like whenever they're like, hey, what's this? Where are you from? And I'm just like, I'm an expat. And they're like, is that near Indonesia?